Ukrainian armed forces drones attacked 5 oil refinery facilities and warehouses on Russian territory yesterday. It was one of the most devastating nights for the Russian Federation since the beginning of 2025. Ukraine has launched a wave of long-range drone strikes against military and industrial targets inside Russia. Ukrainian forces are in full swing with drone strikes aimed at damaging Russia's oil industry and military equipment, which are vital for Moscow to sustain its war effort. Ukraine continues its attacks on facilities that play a role in supporting the Russian Federation's war effort. Over the past year, Ukrainian drones have carried out hundreds of strikes against oil refineries and fuel bases in Russia and occupied Ukrainian territory. Each such attack cost the Russian Federation millions of dollars in damages and complicates the supply of fuel to the Russian military. This latest attack has weakened Russian leader Vladimir Putin's hand considerably. The attack is one of the most ambitious and potentially devastating raids in Ukraine's deep strike campaign, targeting Russia's most vital industries. According to reports, the Ukrainian General Staff reported an airstrike on the Akip-Shef-Lysa-Chan oil pipeline in the city of Cherch, Kosovo, in the Rostov region of the Russian Federation. This is about 130 kilometers from the front line. The strike hit a gas pipeline in the Sakar-Novak region of the Rostov region of the Russian Federation, 160 kilometers from the front line. The Novichok team's oil refinery, located 190 kilometers from the front line, was also attacked. This is Run Oil Refinery in the Samara region of the Russian Federation, 800 kilometers from the front line, and the fuel storage facility in Ravenna in the Luhansk region were also hit by drone strikes. Russian public opinion groups confirmed the strikes on 2 of the 5 oil refinery facilities. Russian government officials said the facilities at the refinery had been hit by Ukrainian drones overnight, but did not comment on the refinery attack. Ukraine's increasingly frequent and destructive drone strikes, coupled with foreign sanctions, are putting pressure on Russian oil exports. The consequences of these latest attacks are becoming more severe, although the traces and effects of the attack were immediately covered. The damaged units have become increasingly difficult to repair. Such units are among the most expensive and vital components of refineries, without which further processing of raw materials is impossible. Western sanctions have made their repair much more difficult and costly for Russia. Recall that in February, a similar drone strike damaged Gazprom's Astrakhan gas processing plant, knocking out its key condensate processing unit for at least 3 months at the time. Its main technological unit, the condensate processing unit, was out of order. Its repair is expected to take at least 3 months. Analysts suggest that Russian oil refineries are facing a similarly prolonged shutdown based on oil industry trade figures covering the period from January to early February. Analysts calculate that Ukraine's drone strikes have disabled about 10% of Russia's refining capacity. The repeated attacks on Russian oil depots have had a major impact on the Russian Federation's war in Ukraine. The Kremlin is tight-lipped about the impact of these airstrikes. But open-source data and media reports indicate significant damage to at least 8 Russian refineries, as well as a number of oil depots and key logistical points, such as pumping stations and ports used for oil and gas exports. Moreover, Ukraine's recent drone strikes on Russian energy infrastructure have managed to disable around 1/10 of Russia's refining capacity. Ukraine is increasingly sending attack drones deep into Russia to strike air bases, weapons depots, and fuel storage sites, as is well known. These strikes are aimed at reducing Russia's ability to export oil, increasing the impact of Western sanctions on Russian energy, and raising the cost of the Russian president's war against Ukraine. Russian oil refineries and pumping stations are entirely legitimate targets. They're used to supply the Russian military in the 3-year war in Ukraine. And not only do they work in Russia's defense sector and fuel enemy troops, they are also important for the Russian economy, which finances the war with oil revenues. In recent months, both sides in the war have increased the use of drones or unmanned aerial vehicles, often targeting the enemy's energy infrastructure in response to Ukraine's escalating attacks. Putin has intensified his offensive on Ukrainian territory, as is well known, in order to circumvent Western restrictions. Ukraine has prioritized the domestic production of long-range drones and missiles capable of hitting targets deep inside Russia. Accordingly, Ukraine's expanding arsenal of locally produced long-range weapons is particularly important at a time of growing uncertainty over the future of U.S. military aid to the country. That Ukraine's remarkable daily attacks on oil refineries and storage depots are now sending a strong message to the Russian people that the war launched by the Kremlin in February 2022 will not only be fought on foreign soil. On the other hand, in line with the ongoing war, Ukraine continues its offensive. According to the latest information, the Ukrainian Air Force struck a Russian military facility in the Kursk region as a result of Ukraine's attack bunkers, firing positions, and nearly 30 Russian soldiers were destroyed. The Ukrainian Air Force struck a military facility of the 28th Rifle Battalion of the 60th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade of the Russian Armed Forces in the Kursk region. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported on its official social media account that as a result of Ukraine's strikes enemy bunkers, firing positions, and nearly 30 soldiers participating in military operations against Ukraine were destroyed. The Ukrainian military said that the Russians were using this area to plan and carry out attacks, in particular launching drones at Ukrainian positions. It was noted that the attack on Russian troops took place the previous night. The Ukrainian Defense Forces are ready to continue operations to destroy Russian military facilities until they stop their armed aggression against the Ukrainian people. The statement said that, in short, Kyiv continues to strike hard with drone strikes targeting Russian oil infrastructure that finances Moscow's war efforts. Yesterday, however, fighting along the more than 1,000-kilometer or 621-mile line of contact in the Russo-Ukrainian war saw heavy clashes in areas recently captured by Ukrainian assault troops. Kyiv forces mostly held their positions, and the attacking Russian troops suffered heavy losses that Ukraine's multi-pronged counteroffensive launched last week in the Ukrainian city of Turets in the Donetsk region of Ukraine gained further strength at the end of the week, driving Russian troops out of the eastern regions. War reports said house-to-house fighting continued as Ukrainian infantry cleared buildings. Drone video reviewed by military experts generally supported Ukraine's claim to a firm foothold in the coal mining town. Russian troops are suffering many casualties but have not given up their intention to seize the city. The Ukrainian Joint Forces Courts, the command said in a statement. Ukrainian intelligence said Russia's 4th Battalion of the 101st Separate Guard Infantry Brigade, an elite unit, was still fighting hard to prevent further Ukrainian advances. In a statement by the Ukrainian Army General Staff, the Russians continued to attack our positions, and Turets' Ukrainian troops did not allow the tactical situation to deteriorate. The defense units remain under pressure and are destroying the superior enemy forces. The statement said that the front line inside the city was calm and stable during the daytime after 13 Russian offensive attempts in the last 24 hours. Experts, however, said that Russian pressure on Turets is unlikely to abate as Russian forces appear to have abandoned their 6-month-old attempt to enter the city of Poke Drops and have chosen the smaller town of Turets as the new, less ambitious main target for Russian offensive operations in eastern Ukraine. The Russian Defense Ministry's daily situation report on Tuesday said operations in the Kraft sector were generally progressing well and that Kremlin forces continued to advance towards the city. Ukrainian sources disputed this and claimed that Kyiv's lines were holding firm in that sector. It was also reported that in the Kutmans district of Kharkiv region in northeastern Ukraine, a Ukrainian soldier cleared fields and pushed Russian troops back to a village called City of Sea in a combined drone, artillery, and infantry attack data feed from the 1st Presidential Brigade. A public service unit that has been fighting on the front line since the early days of the war showed bomber and drone strikes on Russian positions reportedly in and around the village. The General Staff Daily Situation Update published the previous day said that Russian forces had been pushed back and that the line in that sector was stable. That a video released by Condor, the offensive drone unit in the sector, claimed that a Ukrainian kamikaze drone had crashed into 4 Russian surveillance drones and shot them down. The attacks have also intensified following the suspension of U.S. arms aid to Ukraine, which is currently the most debated issue as far as American arms are concerned. The President of the United States has ordered the suspension of all military aid to Ukraine since March 4. In the blink of an eye, the roles changed. The United States, Ukraine's largest arms supplier, suspended military aid to the troubled country while the Trump administration promised to cut America's defense budget. But despite all this, Europe, whose armed forces have been neglected and empty for decades, is pledging a massive rearmament both to revive European power and to keep Ukraine afloat. After 75 years of America leading European defense, Europe's newfound determination to defend itself is exciting. After all, with more than 13% of global gross domestic product and some of the most advanced economies on the planet, Europe does not lack money, technology, or talent. With the announcement by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen that the European Union will allocate $840 billion in defense funding, Europe appears to be putting its words on the euro into action. Perhaps not coincidentally, this is almost the same amount as the United States defense budget for 2024. However, this United States budget figure is for 1 year of defense spending, but it is not clear how many years the European Union's $840 billion would cover. Assuming this proposal is implemented, the EU has also proposed borrowing about $158 billion to lend to member states for artillery, missiles, and other weapons, and the European Union could waive strict fiscal rules that limit members' ability to run deficits. These are not insignificant changes. The European Union was more concerned with the economic and political integration of Europe than with security, which was the raison d'etre of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Actively financing defense procurement seems to foreshadow the European Union becoming a military bloc with an integrated European army. On the other hand, the United States has increased pressure on Russia's peace deal by reducing intelligence sharing on Ukraine. United States CIA Director John Ratcliffe said on Wednesday that the U.S. has stopped sharing intelligence with Ukraine. Ratcliffe pressed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to cooperate with U.S. President Donald Trump in starting peace talks with Russia. The suspension, which could damage Ukraine's ability to defend itself against Russian missile attacks leading to loss of life, followed this week's suspension of United States military aid to Kyiv. IKT underscores Trump's willingness to play hardball with an ally as he shifts from his previous strong U.S. support for Ukraine to a more conciliatory approach toward Moscow. The pressure appears to have worked, Trump said. On Tuesday, he had received a letter from Ukrainian leader Zelensky, saying he was ready to sit down at the negotiating table. I think the pause on both the military and intelligence front will disappear, Ratcliffe said in a statement that I think we will work shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine because we have to push back the aggression there, but also put the world in a better place for peace talks to move forward, the director said. A source close to the matter, speaking on condition of anonymity, said the Trump administration had stopped everything Ukraine was using to attack Russian targets, including targeting data. A second source said intelligence sharing had only been partially cut off, but could not provide further details. Washington halted military aid to Kyiv after Trump and Zelensky got into a shouting match in the Oval Office on Friday in front of the world's media. The confrontation delayed the signing of a deal giving the United States rights to revenues from Ukraine's critical mineral deposits, which Trump has demanded to repay U.S. military aid. Zelensky said on Wednesday that there was positive movement on the issue and that officials from the two countries could meet again soon. The White House announced that it was reconsidering its decision to halt funding to Ukraine and that talks between the two countries on the minerals deal were ongoing. A senior administration official said Wednesday that the signing of the agreement is expected to take place soon and would be the first step in longer negotiations between Ukraine, Washington, and Russia to end the war. The Ukrainian embassy in Washington and the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry have not yet responded to a request for comment. Trump, for his part, told Congress on Tuesday evening that Kyiv was ready to sign a minerals deal. The two leaders' statements could put back on track the rare earth minerals deal, which Zelensky was expected to sign during his visit to Washington on Friday, but was disrupted by the Ukrainian leader's early departure following tensions with Trump. Trump also said he is in serious talks with Russia and has received strong signals that Russia is ready for peace. It is time to end this senseless war, the President of the United States said. If you want to end wars, you have to talk to both sides, he said. But several Democrats criticized the suspension of intelligence sharing. Senator Mark Warner, vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said the ill-considered decision showed that Trump was giving American power to Russia, that in a statement. The Virginia Democrats said, "Let me be clear, cutting intelligence support to our Ukrainian partners will cost Ukrainians their lives." 2 people were killed and 7 wounded when a Russian missile hit a hotel in the central Ukrainian city of Kryvyi very late Wednesday night, emergency officials said. European countries are scrambling to increase defense spending and maintain support for Ukraine. Diplomats said France and Britain aim to finalize a peace plan to present to the United States, while the Dutch government said it would set aside €3.5 billion or $3.8 billion for Ukrainian aid in 2026. The United States has provided Ukraine with critical intelligence for its fight against Moscow's forces. This included information that helped thwart Russian President Vladimir Putin's attempt to seize Kyiv in a full-scale invasion launched in February 2022, but less than 2 months after taking office. Trump has turned United States policy upside down, confusing and alienating European allies, and raising concerns about the future of the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance. He also put an end to Putin's isolation with phone calls with the Russian leader and meetings between Russian and U.S. advisors in Saudi Arabia and Turkey, where Ukraine and European allies were excluded. Some experts said the United States' suspension of intelligence sharing would damage Ukraine's ability to strike Russian forces and defend itself, which occupies about 20% of the country's territory. Nicola Blasko, a research fellow at Ukraine's National Institute for Strategic Studies, said, "Unfortunately, our dependence on this is quite serious." Now hope is expected from the new peace plan for Ukraine that Zelensky presented to Trump. What is Zelensky's new peace plan? Zelensky briefly explained his peace proposal in his official social media account post. The first stages could be the release of prisoners and a ceasefire in the skies, a ban on missiles, long-range drones, bombs on energy and other civilian infrastructure, and an immediate ceasefire at sea if Russia does the same, the Ukrainian president wrote. He added that Ukraine wants to move very quickly through all the next stages and work with the United States on a strong final agreement. Experts said Zelensky's latest move is a specific and excellent way to see if Russia seriously wants a negotiated settlement that could be durable and allow Ukraine to exist as an independent state. Experts say that the details of the peace deal are still unclear, and therefore it may be premature to say anything. That if we think about how acceptable this deal is for Russia, Russia has the luxury of being able to stand back and wait to see if Europe can recover, because there is nothing concrete yet. And that puts Moscow in a very comfortable position. But some experts think that Zelensky's proposal could work against Russia. We can think that this is a good deal for Russia, but it remains to be seen whether the United States will accept the same deal. That it is safe to say that it will depend on the extent to which Trump is motivated by the minerals deal. The question is whether Trump will resume military aid deliveries and intelligence sharing with Ukraine if the United States and Ukraine sign the minerals deal. However, experts said that a serious negotiated settlement would require Trump not only to resume this aid, but also to increase it. Officials said that even if the United States signs the minerals agreement, it is unclear whether Zelensky will sign it on behalf of Ukraine or someone from the Ukrainian parliament. The United States seems to want to negotiate with Ukraine and not specifically with Zelensky. Recall that Trump recently criticized Zelensky for not holding elections since the beginning of the war, that on February 19th, in a post on Truth Social, he called the Ukrainian leader an unelected dictator. Experts say that once a deal is signed, the White House may demand elections in Ukraine. If that is the United States' plan, it might make more sense for a parliamentarian to sign the minerals deal on behalf of Ukraine instead of Zelensky, so that Kyiv cannot use legal loopholes to reject the deal in the future. He said, "This comes at a time of low trust between the United States and Ukraine."